So, I've been watching these videos by a YouTuber called Drubinski, who essentially what his goal is to visit every single country around the world. Um, Quite an ambitious goal, one that I may ascribe to myself at times. Um, but he has a lot of videos on Iran. And if you know anything about the current media situation surrounding Iran, it's overwhelmingly targeted to make them seem as if they're this, belligerent, evil power. When people in the media talk, my dog just made a little sound. Um, when people in the media talk about Iran, it's this dictatorial kind of rhetoric that there's evil in the air, that there's dangerous elements at play, and there's a lot of fear mongering surrounding the country. Um, but what I found the most interesting about these videos that he's made is that the normal media critique of Iran being that it's this isolated nation that sticks too closely to its traditional values and isn't allowing itself to be a larger part of global human rights and a global standard that's been set, um, seem to be, I think, the causes for many of its strengths in an almost roundabout way. And I'm going to explain why. Is that if you look at most other countries that have unfettered access to consumerism, to the internet, and the international understanding of what it is to be a citizen. This very liberal, globalized view of what a person is. People start to kind of blend in with one another. In my country, the United States, we had for the longest time local cultures, in the specific parts of the country you were in. You had the Midwest, you had the South, you had the North, the Northeast, and there were all these little pockets in the country that had their own identity, their own understanding of what life was like. You either had a hardened New Yorker who was, industrial and they got home from the factory every day, or you had an Okie from Muskogee, just working on their farm. It's a very different understanding of what life was like, even down to the language that people use. The accents, I think, seem to be the most clear sign of how homogenized everyone has become, because I grew up in the deep south. I grew up in the most rural part of Tennessee you can get to, almost. Um, Everyone who I was around, except for like my dad, because he came from California, was someone who spoke with a thick, thick Southern accent. If they were older, at least. The younger people, not so much. But the older people, they spoke with a thick Southern accent. That's what I was exposed to. But I was also exposed to the television. I was also exposed to the internet at a point, um, and video games, the media. And I got a different sense as to how to talk from the media in comparison to the people who I spoke to the point where the media began to outnumber the people. And the way that I learned how to speak came from the media rather than from the people. This localized understanding of who you should be, who you are. Um, and I think that's a very like direct causal link between globalization, the homogenization of one way of speaking that's present throughout the media, which often comes from one place or a synergy of places, Hollywood, these kinds of things, Silicon Valley. That Me growing up, I didn't have like an identity tied to that place. I didn't have an accent up to a point. I didn't have a feeling, a warm feeling about this is my culture, this is my group, this is where I come from, this is our identity. It was more so like I was a citizen of the world at that point. I mean, the closest thing I had was being an American, but the only thing we really have is just settler colonialism. We go, oh, we speak English less good than British people do, and also we can take over your country right away. Let's do it. It didn't. It feels like we're the best at making like high budget movies that don't say anything. And how am I going to identify with that? Am I just going to identify with being mediocre? And going back to the Iranian example, it's very interesting to me that they have continually, if you listen to Hassan Rouhani, the president, talk, he insists that the country is neither capitalist nor socialist. They say not capitalism but Islam. That's a large part of Iranian rhetoric on state-run TV. They have the moral police, quote unquote, in Iran who often do arrest wealthy people who do not adhere to the strict societal and cultural standards that are put in place. That a number of sectors of the economy are socialized. They have the big nationalized industries in the country, which the revenue generated from that then goes back into the people for religious purposes. Based on religious values, that one could make the argument that the private property in the country, the productive relations generally being private in the hands of private owners, in the hands of capitalists who own labor power through their workers, one could say that it is a capitalist country in that sense. But most of the business in the country is either owned domestically and domestic private businesses with big state oversight, or is just owned by the state. And there seems to be these kind of regulations and strict cultural standards that are employed through the law and through the media that would suggest that a more conservative model, a model based on the identity and history of the nation, rather than strict international standards placed on them, rather than through what you would find through a site like YouTube or Facebook, sort of connecting everyone together, forcing everyone to speak one way. I've heard Indians who don't even have much of an accent anymore. They just sound like Americans. I've heard stories of people, sitting in front of their mirror for hours and hours at a time, just trying to get rid of their local accent so they can sound more like the homogenous same model that's been put out through Western media. And the people who lead by example, the people who say you should sound like us, you should think like us, just happen to be the people who were lucky enough to have the geography to industrialize several hundred years ago, to have a big military, and to know how to invest in media that makes itself look good, to market itself, to say, hey, we're good, everybody else is bad. Now we're going to spread our model around, we're going to spread our media around, you guys should all be like us. In a way, it was a big game of luck that, America just had the perfect geography to do all of that. The right people were in the right place at the right time and stuff like that. And so it feels very weird to me that a model, a way of life, a way of thinking and talking that's considered to be kind of like the international standard, the standard that's eroding local cultures, that is destroying local cultures and ways of doing things, is the one that I think is the most bare bones and commodified. We have religions in the US, but all of the traditional cultures, all the traditional religions seem to have this weird market slant on them. You have these private church institutions that say, hey, just give me millions and millions of dollars and you'll be liberated or something. Obviously, if you're an honest Christian, you would say, no, I just have to follow Jesus and then I'm liberated. It's that simple. I shouldn't have to give millions and millions of dollars to some church speaker guy who knows how to use good sounding words and gets tons and tons of tax breaks, or no taxes at all for money that he made through this church institution to buy more private jets or helicopters or something. There are people who've made hundreds of millions of dollars off of being a for-profit church, of just talking religious to people. And it's a very direct correlation between the profit motive and the erosion of local culture, of traditions. That now people's traditions have become a product to sell to them rather than a genuine part of their identity. And you also see this in the erosion of the rules that these religions have. You look at something like Reform Judaism, where a large part of Reform Judaism, a large part of its rhetoric, is surrounded around this idea that faith is so subjective that anybody can make their own path to faith if they just believe hard enough or if they just think about it hard enough. It's retarded. It doesn't make any sense. It's not adhering to fundamental Jewish laws that were written, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, that have continued to be the same, that cannot be reinterpreted, that are right there in the book. And they're just saying, no, just don't worry about any of that. Just however you feel is the way that your religion is going to follow you through life. It makes no sense. And you see the same thing with liberal Christians, or the more liberal sections of Islam, where they say, oh, Allah has many ways of conveying himself and all this other nonsense. Just adhere to what the tradition says. There isn't this wishy-washy kind of liberal interpretive element. It just is what it is, And this idea that you can just subjectively commodify the aesthetics, the base level qualities of a religion into whatever you want, so you can ship it all around the world and make everybody a part of it and sell more products and get more people to come out to your TED Talk or whatever. It takes away what these things were meant for in the first place. The spiritual, the traditional, the communal aspect of it. Having a group, your people who come to partake in a mosque or a synagogue or a church together, who aren't necessarily your family on a blood relation level, but are people you care about nonetheless. That the people you walk down the street to see, to meet, to talk to, aren't these cogs inside of some kind of financial and industrial machine. They're people who you don't care about as much as your family, but you care about them. You can talk to them, you can sit down with them, and if you forgot some of your change at their marketplace, they'll spend 10 minutes running across the marketplace just to give you your change back, and so it gave me a lot to think about, because capitalism and sort of the corporate model that the world is based on, liberalism, has perpetuated itself so strongly, has asserted its dominance so heavily, that I can speak to people from European countries who are just Americans. They just are. Like, sure, they may know 2 or 3 other languages than we do because we're lazy and we think we're better than everybody else, but they're essentially just Americans. Culturally, in terms of how they think, they were raised on the same media, they view things the same way, and I think that's really sad. I think it's really sad that local culture in our country and in other countries around the world has become almost a sight to see, a surprise, You see people working together and acting as one unit, as a force together, instead of as autonomous individuals simply pursuing their own private ends, and in a sea of commodities and of private businesses, that they're just these autonomous creatures, not connected to any higher power spiritually, not connected to their fellow man. They just exist to either accumulate money for themselves or someone else, in this kind of homogenous cultural bubble that doesn't really step on anyone's toes, and is just, we're not going to offend anybody, because the most politically correct way that offends the least people makes the most money, and everything we do is going to be disingenuous, because in order to make money you have to do that. Everyone is going to be the same, because when everyone is the same, that's the easiest market to sell things to. Um, you don't need to have demographics in marketing if everyone is the same demographic. That's the terrifying thing about globalism. It's because we need to disagree. We need to have different ideas, different faiths, different ways of doing things. That's part of who we are. It's part of where we come from. We don't come from the globe. We don't come from the earth. We come from our country. We're proud of our country. And if we're not proud of our country, we move to a different country that more effectively conveys our own sense of values. If you become an Islamist in America, you move to a Muslim country, Shia or Sunni. I'm not saying Muslims should be kicked out of the U.S. That's not what I'm saying. Don't lynch me here. But I'm saying that people's local senses of identity, of culture, it's dying. And I don't want to live in a world where everyone is just the same, where everyone is proud to be a citizen of the earth. I want to live in a world where people are very different, where we do disagree a lot, where our traditions and the places that we've come from are effectively preserved, where it's genuine, where it's real, where your human interactions with other people are not monetary exchanges between autonomous individuals in the pursuit of capital and accumulate. None of that. Collaborations for people should not be a simple way for two individuals to both make more money, or to both gain something. That's the thing that I hate the most. This idea of gaining. We're mutually beneficial, mutual gain. The only mutual gain that we should be talking about is, how do I feel when I help this person across the street? Oh, random person, I have time today. I'm not doing anything. I'm not just going to sit here on the stoop all day. Let me walk you through the city. Let me show you around. I want to make a new friend. That's the joy. That's the mutual benefit for me, is making a new friend. The mutual benefit for me is being able to feel that I did something good today. That I was not just this selfish kind of in my own world person, that I was someone to someone else, that we, not I, we did something. And the we is slowly being killed off in favor of this global financial system that puts you not in a world of your own, or a box or whatever. It puts you, I'm starting to lose the words for this. It puts you in a box with nothing in it. That's what I would say. Like, people who are parts of their own local cultures, they're in a box. There's lots of stuff in it, and they quite enjoy the box. With American global homogenous liberal culture, it's just you're in a giant box and then there's nothing inside. Or if it is, it's all smiling faces trying to sell you a new iPhone or something. That's the problem. And, People call me a conservative all the time now, which I think is pretty funny because they say, oh, well, conserving tradition doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. There's no reason for it. Tradition, bad. It doesn't have any value on its own. I disagree. It's part of who we are. It's part of who we are. We have to preserve that. It's what makes us unique. It's what makes us interesting. This idea that everyone should just be the same, part of this same financial, global, social, cultural system. Who gets to decide that? Who gets to decide we're going to divide up the world into little pieces where you make that much money and we're all part of our own tribes. That's how it's always been. We've all been part of our own tribes. And I don't want to be stuck under the boot of cultural values and a system that I not only disagree with, but I also feel is asserting itself all over the world to turn us into cogs in a machine, to remove our individuality in the pursuit of, ironically, individualism. That individualism, more than anything else, turns us into not unique and fun people who are enjoying our lives, but as tools for people who are experiencing their own individualism. As people who act as wheels turning in this ginormous ephemeral machine that is controlled by very few people. You look at Disney. What's Disney doing? A lot of your kids' morals will be defined by Disney. Disney now owns Marvel and Star Wars. Two of the largest franchises, most popular franchises in the world. You can meet people in Afghanistan who love Star Wars on the street. Star Wars is everywhere. It is a consumerist product. It's not a film franchise. It is a product for consumption. Maybe it started out the other way around, but George Lucas himself has heavily criticized the nature of consumerism in the film industry, which I've talked about a lot. And so Disney, as this ginormous billions and billions of dollars company, can just decide, we want to put lesbians in this movie. And your kid is going to have to see some lesbians. I mean, I'm in favor of gay people having the right to do what they do. I'm not against it. But you can't say that Disney, as a company, a ginormous company, having the ability to do that is not going to affect your kids in some way. Is not going to affect the way that they perceive the world and live their lives. Do we want a company with that much power, with that much strength, to be deciding what exactly it is that your kids view and understand? Now, gay people are fine. I'm not saying that gay people aren't fine. I'm just saying that do we want a ginormous company deciding whether or not it is okay for those kids to see them? How does that contrast with your view of the world? The way that you and your people have historically viewed things? I think it's an interesting thing to think about. And the idea that these companies should simply have the right to tell you, hey, you, maybe being a venture capitalist and stepping all over everyone in your path to make millions of dollars ain't such a bad thing. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe you should do it. Now, telling an entire generation how to live their lives, what is wrong and what is right, from that large of an institution, a global institution, it's incredibly dangerous. And they all collude with one another. What was the origin of Silicon Valley? Silicon Valley, this this institution that regularly censors and bans conservative and left-wing and radical left-wing media. You know, you saw recently all of the Cuban news accounts and politicians were banned off of Twitter, as well as a number of, Cuban supporters, just normal Cuban citizens on Twitter. And people who support Cuba have been en masse banned off Twitter. YouTube did the same thing with pro-North Korea YouTube accounts. They did the same thing with Iran. It's freedom of speech. That's your First Amendment. And the reason why we have antitrust laws is because those ginormous companies like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube that have a virtual monopoly on information, on what you hear and what you see as a citizen, have a right to uphold freedom of speech, or else they get broken up into smaller companies. That's antitrust. When a company has too large of a grip on society, that it becomes detrimental to society and one's constitutional rights, those companies are broken up into smaller companies so that there's competition and all that. And so Twitter and YouTube, they're such homogenous entities, such companies with such large amounts of power, too much power that needs to be given to different multiple hands. They can just decide, we're not going to let you be a conservative Christian. We're not going to let you be a communist or a socialist. You're just going to have this, kind of social democratic, maybe Bernie is fine, or whatever. Just vote for one of the Democrats. We're Silicon Valley, yeah, more Democrats, more war. That's their modus operandi. And that's very dangerous. That's very, very dangerous, because at the same time that they censor anti-war media, that they censor, conservative and left-wing talking points, they're going to continue shoving the same late-night talk shows down your throat that tell you that Hillary and AOC and all of these other bloodsuckers are just the most based human beings alive, and they're all so based, and whatever your traditions and your views, they don't matter. It's just don't question the system. Don't talk about it. Don't question the system. Just take our corporate idea of what you should be and what you should think, and just keep fucking shoving it down your mouth. And don't question it. Don't think about anything else. You'll get banned for that. You'll get banned for that if you aren't banned off of YouTube or Twitter continually over and over and over again for expressing a different view. They're going to come to your PayPal accounts. There have been a number of people who have been anti-war, who have been audited and spied on by the FBI. The FBI has made statements saying that they have done this. Been a number of whistleblowers and so on who there were channels set up for them that were there in the government for them to leak information that all said no, you can't do that. Their First Amendment rights gone. You have people who have conservative views, who have left-wing views, who want their work supported by PayPal, by banking, one of these systems, and then they get banned. They're not allowed to have those views. They get banned by the financial systems, who they don't all have the same views, but they all have the view that capital should be the dominant force, and members in the ruling class disagree with one another, but by and large, that commodification of local culture is a homogenous element within their ideology. They all have that same interest. They all have the same interest that capital should be the dominant force, not tradition. And if you look at what's going on with Iran right now, all of the major media sources are essentially on the war train. Happened with Syria as well. And what I'm getting to here is that the world around you there's a small group of people who control it. To quote George Carlin, it's a big club, and you ain't in it. And I gotta wonder what that's gonna do as the years go by. I don't want to be a part of it. I want to preserve where I came from. my family's history. My family has a rich history. I want to preserve that. My great grandfather, he was a Jewish a Jewish immigrant from Germany in the Great Depression. He came to America, and there's a long, long history there of strong Jewish people, and this idea that I can't have that. And I'm not talking about in the Zionist way. Like, I don't support Israel. I think Israel is kind of a settler, colonialist, bad country in a lot of ways. But that idea that, like, I can't hold on to those values, those morals, because there's a more liberal, clean version that's telling me how I should talk, what language to speak, what things I should buy, what the... I don't want everyone to blend in with one another. I want people to cooperate, work together to be part of a community, but not be part of a community that is based around greed or based around a lack of an identity. I want a strong, rich sense of identity among people, and of tolerance, and of acceptance, but of a proper kind. Not this wishy-washy, everyone has their own way to faith, and everyone has their own way of... No, 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 no. Disagreement with people. To disagree, to be able to disagree. To have different values, to have a different culture, and have that be okay. You're over here, I'm over here. Sometimes we hang out in the same places, sometimes we live in the same places, but we're different. And we can get over those differences. We can work together in spite of that, but that's what makes it more powerful. It's not a gray world where everyone just blends in order to pursue individual private means, to be these autonomous individuals who make the money and all this stuff. To be human beings. To be human beings who can say, I am proud of my country. I am proud of my country. I am proud to have come from here because I know who I am. I know who I am. I was born in, this state, and my state has these beautiful steel industries, and there's this local food that no one else has, and we talk here with this kind of accent, and these are the words that we use. Oh, you're on furlough? What does that mean? A sense of who you are. Everywhere else in the world is slowly being killed by this neoliberal vision that as long as you just buy more stuff, you're a person. As long as you just watch these Disney movies and follow what these couple super, super rich people say that your morals should be, and as long as we export our model around the world, everything's going to be great because we're all going to be the same. We're all going to have these wishy-washy, fucking politically correct views on how to talk and how to treat people. It infuriates me. That level of globalization and of homogenization infuriates me. And you can call me a conservative, but I'll conserve whatever I can over international mediocrity.